Hey Dunchbags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and welcome to my review of the newest compilation from Monstercat. This is for their 5-year anniversary. The compilation album just dropped today, but as a writer I've actually had all the tracks on it for a couple weeks now. So essentially all the surprises that were revealed on this album I got all at the same time, which made for a little bit of a different experience than most Monstercat fans, but regardless I was still just as hyped as everyone else over these. This is actually my first compilation review ever, so the format's going to be a little different. If you're wondering why I haven't done any of the other Monstercat albums, it's basically because it's very hard to review a full 30-track album along with 2 bonus mixes. It's very hard to even get through those albums because they're so long. So honestly, what a regular Monstercat compilation review would look like is just me targeting my highlights from the albums and not probably giving it a rating, because I do have my favorites, but it's very hard to place a number on something with that many tracks. This one, on the other hand, was very different because it came with a load of surprises and was only 10 tracks long, so I figured why not. The first big surprise on this one that everyone found out about was the return of ELECTRO, who was a producer on Monstercat way back in the day. I actually think his last appearance before this compilation was on 009, which was about 18 Monstercat albums ago, which is absolutely crazy to think about. And he's released a few singles on his own, along with a couple remixes, a couple of those being a little throwback to his dubstep sound, but he has gone in a number of directions, including trap, future bass, and even trance, which I thought his track Catfish was actually one of his better singles, and I was surprised when it wasn't released on Monstercat. This return, in theory, is absolutely monumental. On terms of the actual track, it's a bit different and not exactly what you'd expect coming from ELECTRO. It is deep house. It's a collaboration with Stephen Walking, which is no surprise considering the two have collaborated before. Deep house isn't something you wouldn't come to expect from Stephen Walking, but coming from ELECTRO would probably be quite a bit different. Although I didn't think the production on this one was fantastic, it definitely is a different step for ELECTRO, and I'm glad to see him back on the label, and hopefully we'll see more from him in the future. I also thought the vocals from Aaron Richards served to complement this production very well, and I'm glad they ended up adding him to the track. Although there were a few awesome surprises on this album, there were a couple that I thought were pretty bland. Although I didn't necessarily think any of the tracks on this album were bad, there were a few on this one that just really weren't doing a lot for me. For example, Muzzy's Crescendo, which I think has one of the cheesiest vocal lines he's ever put in a track. Although I was fairly impressed with the production on this one, him kind of experimenting with jump up D&B, which was a bit different than his usual style. Overall, just wasn't extremely impressed with this one, as well as Blackout by Pegboard Nerds, which once again continues into the electro style that they've been pumping out prior to their 2016 dubstep streak that they've been on for a while. It's cool to see them kind of jump out of this and more into that main stage electro house sound. Slips and Slurs Divided VIP is another one of those ones that I wasn't really absolutely crazy about. I don't think it steps too far out from where the original was going, just basically speeds it up or slows it down in some parts. Of course, it's kind of what you'd come to expect from a VIP, but overall I don't think it was any more impressive than the original, although I did like the drum and bass infusion on the second drop on this one. Thought that was really cool. I also really don't have a lot to say about this Feeling by Noise Storm. I feel like we're in kind of the same boat as we were with the Pegboard Nerds track. It's him back on electro, kind of in a more main stage ready track, and I really don't think this one follows up well to some of his more impressive later singles that he's been putting out. On the other hand, just about every other track that I haven't mentioned on this one is pretty freaking awesome. Stonebank, for example, actually made a really impressive trance debut on this album, and with a sound like this, I'm actually surprised Stonebank didn't move in this direction sooner, due to the fact that his hard dance sound transitioned so well into this piece, although I didn't think ML's vocals were really that impressive in this track. Production-wise, this is absolutely one of my favorites on the album. We see Rogue's return to dubstep on the track Imperfect Views, which I thought made an awesome return, definitely different from his harder style of dubstep that he was going for just a couple years ago. I really like the Glassware production samples that are used all across this track. The more chill sections of this one lead really well into the melodic dubstep drop, which is absolutely killer. Another one of the huge tracks, and probably among my favorites, is the track Tribal by Laszlo. I actually got to hear a number of work-in-progress versions of this track before Laszlo finally released the final version, and boy has it improved. It goes from a kind of playful C418 cat sound in the beginning into a hard minimal electro house drop that you could have heard on deadmau5's last album, While One Is Less Than Two, and then from there it has a pretty smooth transition into a Wewek-esque drop with some ridiculously catchy tribal drums sampled in there. From there the track moves into a little bit more what you'd come to expect from Laszlo, with a little bit more of a melodic portion, although I don't think that section distracts from the fact that this is probably one of Laszlo's most unique singles to date. If he hasn't already, Laszlo is moving to become one of Monstercat's best producers, making some of the most unique tunes we've seen, especially on his last single like Sphere. He's just killing it. I don't know what to say. Following that track, we get the absolutely nuts 5-way collaboration between Richard Caddick, World, Slips and Slurs, Nitro Fun, and Subtact called Break the Silence. Although a lot of people would probably think this track to be a little bit underwhelming for a track that 5 producers worked on, I can say I truly love the track. I especially love going through it and kind of picking out the individual production aspects that each producer brings to the table on this one. From what I understand, for the most part, this is basically a Richard Caddick track featuring 4 other producers because he tended to orchestrate most of the project as well as did his own vocals on it. But beside that, I just think it's a really cool track to both pick apart and to listen to. The compilation closes off with the illustrious Before We Fade by Tristan, which I honestly think follows up a little bit weird to his more Odessa sounding Devotion that he released earlier this year, as we see Tristan kind of coming back into the drum step scene. Although I did actually hear a number of indie dance elements, especially in the bass line of this track, and there were some really awesome vocal chops that come out throughout the drop on this one, and I actually really love the amount of contrast used on this. We've got kind of a dark, harmonious verse with Tristan's own vocals, and then of course we get into the bright melodic drop, which also features his vocals but in a little bit more of a lighter tone, along with those wacky yet emotional vocal chops. And then toward the end of the track we actually get a pretty impressive synth solo from Tristan, which is probably my favorite portion of the track. I actually think this song makes the perfect closer for the album because the emotion found in that final stretch of the track actually makes me want more and more, making me want to revisit not just the song but the full album itself. Although I did definitely have some picks with this compilation, I do think it's one of Monstercat's best that they've done recently. I absolutely loved their 27th compilation album. It's probably my favorite that they've done since 17 Ascension. I think this 5-year anniversary compilation follows it very well, and I'm really looking forward to their 28th compilation as well, which has some of the most unique music I think they've put out. But for this compilation, I'm feeling a strong 6.5 out of 10. If you guys have listened to all these tracks, make sure to let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you haven't listened yet, of course, I have the usual stream linked in the description so you can go check it out and support these awesome artists. And I hope you guys enjoyed my first compilation review ever. Anyway, I'm Landon Remixes, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.